So the clip that you just heard was from a recap of an episode of Insecure, one of my favorite TV shows, period. Um, you don't necessarily have to have watched Insecure to understand what they were talking about. But what they were talking about, for those of you who aren't familiar with the show, they were talking about the friendships and the dynamics that one of the characters, Lawrence, had with his friends and how he made life changes and how his friends, you know, did or didn't, interact with him or support him or just be there, uh, quote unquote, like a woman would. Um, and so I'm watching this recap, and that's what made me decide to do this bonus episode of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm 12 Kyle, by the way, in case you hadn't figured it out. Um, so yeah, the voices that you hear are from Yvonne Orji, Issa Rae, and the showrunner Prentice Penny. Prentice is the male voice that you hear. And Prentice, I think, makes a good point. We as men are extremely loyal to our friends, our homies, homeboys, whatever you want to call them. And it just made me kind of chuckle. Like, what he said was true. Like, you can have a friend, you can have a friend that you call like he's your boy, and you don't necessarily talk to him every day. Or maybe it's been a while since you talked to him, or maybe it's been a couple of months. And I've tried to make sure that I get better at this, where I don't have the length in between times that we go without talking, or at the very least texting. Um, but yeah, I got some. It's funny to say, but I got some boys that I haven't like talked to. I don't know, in 6 months, 8 months, maybe a year. Um, like it's funny because one of my homeboys, I mean, like we've been tight since like high school, right? And he sent me a text. It was about 2 weeks ago. And when I laughed at the text and I responded, we had a little exchange back and forth. And then I looked at the previous text. We had not texted. Okay, so he texted me, I want to say, like at the time of this recording, it was the, let's just say, the beginning of September. And when I looked at the previous text, we hadn't texted since like February. And, I mean, we just haven't. And we haven't talked. We probably hadn't talked on the phone in about a year. But that's still my man. Like, we're still boys. And when we do talk, I mean, we literally will pick up like where we left off, wherever we left off at. So I don't necessarily it's not a situation where, unlike, I'll just say, the women that I know, including the one that I'm married to, my wife, where she will talk to her friends, some of her close friends, on a consistent basis. I have some homeboys that I consider to be like brothers that we don't talk like we don't talk that often. Um, but I think, guys, to Princess's point, I think we're extremely loyal. I can honestly say that that is an endearing quality that I have in myself as far as when it comes to my friends. Um, I'm extremely loyal, but I never wanted to ask something of a friend or anyone really for that matter, but ask something of them that I wasn't willing to provide myself, right? So if I'm going to be extremely loyal to, let's say, Jay Fresh, I expect the same in return. And I use Jay Fresh for an example. Now, Jay Fresh and I, we communicate. We'll talk at least once a week, um, but we'll text like every day or every other day, probably every other day. Um, and sometimes when we talk, we'll talk. I don't know. We get on the phone. I might look up. It's been an hour and a half. Particularly if it has been some time between the time that we talked and the last time that we talked. Um, my boy Juan's another, and I I was looking at my phone yesterday, and it's like, I was like, yo, I gotta call Juan because I have not talked to Juan in like, we haven't talked on the phone in like 2 months. But that's like my boy. He's like, he's one of he's my son Brandon's godfather. I mean, like Juan and I go back to college. So, but we haven't, and we've texted and we tweeted, Instagram, but we have not talked on the phone. Um, Probably in about 2 months. But I mean, I mean, I don't necessarily have to talk to my friends every day. Now I do have a set of friends, in the group chat, uh, who we talk every day. And so, you know, I don't know, but I mean, they're still your boys. Like, and I would probably say that I probably have more homeboys, people that I consider my partners, people in my crew. I probably have more than the average man. um, because and I mentioned it before on the podcast, and it's worth repeating. Like, I got a set of friends, clique, my crew that I grew up with from my hometown. Then I got a set of clique of crew cast that I went to college with. And then I got a set of clique of crew of guys that, I met along the way, even after, graduation and becoming a young man and young adult. And, never, I can honestly say, like, I have not. And I don't know if it's necessarily something to brag about, but I mean, I guess it's a cool thing. Like, I've never lost a friend. Like, you know how, like, friends will fall out for stuff. And I maintain that guys don't necessarily fall out of friendships like that. Or maybe they do. I don't, I don't know, because I've never had those type of relationships where I've lost. I mean, like, I got one friend that he went from being a friend to an associate. And I, it's funny because, like, he'll text me on Father's Day. And over the last 3 or 4 years, that's when we've communicated, on Father's Day. He sent me a text, yo, happy Father's Day, fam. Happy Father's Day back, whatever, whatever. And that's been about it. We haven't had a conversation on the phone or anything. Probably in the better part of the last 3 or 4 years. And it's cool. I mean, like, it is what it is. I don't sweat it. But if I saw him today, I mean, I dap him up, hug him, show love, and we talk and we catch up or whatever like that. But we probably not hanging out. And it's not that, you know, I can't even really say we grew apart. It's just, but he just went from being a friend to an associate. That's all. It's no big deal. Like, I don't want to see nothing bad happen to him. I want him to rule the world if he can. And that's the thing with guys. I think we genuinely, are loyal to a point where we want to see our friends exceed, succeed. Um, and I think that's pretty. At least it is for me and my friends. I want the world for my friends, because if my friends win, I win. Period. I don't necessarily have to have the $1 million job or the $1 million house because they do, but if they won to get that, then we won, and I'm happy for their success. Um, but I think guys, we're pretty loyal. Now, again, I can't speak to what women are or aren't because I'm not a woman, but you know, we sometimes we could have major life changes and we, maybe not catching up. Because, like, I had something happen to me, career wise, and it was an accomplishment, and for whatever reason, I just was slow to get around to everybody to tell them about what happened. And actually, at the time of this recording, there's still a few that don't know. I mean, I'll tell them, but you know, cool. But I think, especially as we get older, as men, you realize that you have people in your life, guys in your life for certain reasons. And, I'm pretty sure at the age that I am, I'm not really into making a bunch of friends at this point. I mean, I can, but it's not a destination. I mean, if I got to be real cool with somebody at this point, that's different. But, No, I enjoy the friendships and the relationships that I have, and again, I'm extremely loyal to them. Um, I'll say this much: uh, I put in to my friendships as much as I can, and I expect the same to be reciprocated, and it always is. And it's not again. I think for us, it's like with men, a lot of times stuff doesn't have to be said, but once you see them, once you talk to them, if you know that they're okay and they're doing fine, then you're good, right? So it's not a situation where you got to check up on them or anything like that. But I will say, even the friends that I don't communicate with as much, and I think I can speak for most men when I say this, you know, we want to know that everybody's okay. Right now we're still in the middle of a global pandemic, and you don't know how that being isolated, being in the house, being, cooped up for 2 years, if you will, for at least for some. Some of y'all just been out here wilding the whole time. But, you don't know how that affects people mentally. And, for a guy, I think the easiest default is, man, how you doing? I'm fine. That's the default, to say I'm fine or I'm okay. And especially nowadays, he might say he's okay, but he really might not be okay. And as a friend, you have to be able to kind of see through that. And that's why I think it's important to, get on the phone as opposed to sending a text. Because sometimes you need to hear that voice. And sometimes, guys will go into stuff with what's going on, because it's more than just saying, man, I'm cool. Because, as we saw in the episodes, if you follow Insecure, if you watched Insecure, there were times of moments of vulnerability, for Lawrence. And he had this one friend, Chad, who Chad would kind of kick him anytime he became vulnerable, or kind of got down on himself. Um, and it's funny because as I watch Insecure, my boy Jay Fresh, he's my Chad. He says the shit that you probably shouldn't say, but he says it anyway without any cares of the world. And he's always been that way. I mean, I've known him since we were 6, right? So, um, but yeah, I think we as men, we can be vulnerable. We can share our feelings and our emotions, particularly, like I said, in a time like this. And if you have friends that are loyal, they'll be there for you, and they'll listen to what you have to say. But yeah, I think most of us are pretty loyal. I think that's a quality that, with men, I don't necessarily think it has to be said. Like, it's just something that's done. Like, it's just a badge. Like, you know, if I rock with you, and I always say this too, like, if I rock with you, you know. Like, nobody has to question whether or not I'm their friend or not. Like, if you got a question, like, I don't know, I think me and Kyle are cool. Nah, you know. Like, it ain't a whole bunch of people I don't rock with, but if I don't rock with you, you know. And if I'm friends with you, you know. And if you're my boy, you know. I don't think that my personality or how I interact with them leaves anything to interpretation. I think it's pretty clear cut as to where I stand. And I've made, over this last few years, particularly, thinking about podcasting and everything like that, I've made some great friends. I mean, people that I consider to be friends. Um, but yeah, I think we're pretty loyal. We're pretty loyal, and we demand that from each other. And I think loyalty is something that, with men, obviously goes a long way. You can think about even something as simple as the neighborhood that you grew up in as a guy. And I don't know, let's say the neighborhood had a crew. All of a sudden you get in that crew. And then, depending on where you live and the time that you live, that crew could become a gang. I mean, for what it's worth. a gang is about as loyal as you can be. You're literally putting your life on the line for these other gentlemen. But you get my point. No, dudes are loyal. We're extremely loyal. We're probably more loyal to each other than we are to women, if we're being honest. And I don't necessarily know that there's anything wrong with being loyal to your homeboy. As long as he reciprocates the feeling back, what's the problem? That's going to do it for me. Thank you for checking out this bonus edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm your boy 12 Kyle. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. The podcast drops every Thursday at midnight. From time to time, on Sundays, we will drop bonus episodes just like this, and they drop at midnight on Sundays. Again, that's going to do it for me. I'll catch you guys next time. 5Gs.